Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight on this Monday night here. We got some special guests from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and we're going to talk a little bit of turkey talk with us. We've got, I'm sorry, Mike, if I get your name wrong here. Mike Chivione? Chavone, okay. And then we've got Josh Stiller. And we also got Maureen Wren. I believe I saw Maureen on there. And then we also have Dr. Jacqueline Lendrum. I hope I got that name, everyone's names right as well. Sorry about that if I didn't. But they're going to talk to us a little bit about turkeys. But first, I'm going to turn it over, I guess, to Maureen. Maureen, to start.
Thank you all for accommodating us again. I know Mike and Josh will have really great information about the turkeys. We also have from DEC on Shah Mahar, our Executive Deputy Commissioner, and he wanted to have the pleasure of introducing Jackie to the crew here. So I'm going to turn it over to him. And as always, if there's any follow-ups from this that you need us to follow up on, just please don't hesitate to let me know. I'll be taking notes here as well, and hopefully it'll be a nice night. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, Chris and crew, for hosting us once again. I know I saw you in the fall. I think I was still the chief of staff at that point in time. We've gone through a number of transitions here at DEC, and many of which we're going to talk about tonight, and probably the most important one, which is Dr. Jackie Lendrum stepping in as the director of the Division of Fish and Wildlife for DEC. So before I introduce Jackie, Commissioner did just want me to send his best. As you probably know, he's been crisscrossing the state here over the last few weeks, working hard on the Climate Action Council work that's underway to review the scoping plan that's out for public comment right now. Obviously encourage many of your listeners here tonight to pay attention to that. We're looking to fight climate change in a multitude of fronts, and the commissioner is very well, knee deep in that right now, but I know he's looking to get out this turkey season, wanted me to send his best, and he definitely looks forward to meeting up with you all on one of these future sessions. But in the meantime, he did want me to introduce Jackie on his behalf, and we're really excited that Jackie has stepped up into this new role as the director of the Division of Fish and Wildlife for DEC. Jackie is a 15-year veteran of DEC, really a mover and shaker within the Division of Water, and we're glad that we were able to coax her on over to the natural resource side of the equation. And she's a great conservation practitioner, a great leader and manager, a true inspiration for me at the top as well. And it's been really great to watch her grow, throughout her DEC tenure, but really start growing into this position as well. And it's my honor and privilege to really be able to introduce her tonight and turn it over to her to let her say a few words too. So Jackie, why don't you take us away?
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Maureen. So I'm super excited to be here tonight, albeit a little uncomfortable, as everyone who knows me. This new role is just a huge honor, and something that I'm excited to talk about and to be part of. As Sean mentioned, that I've been part of the DEC team for quite some time now. Mostly behind the camera though. So this new role in front of the camera, as I said, is a little uncomfortable. I come to the Division of Fish and Wildlife from our Division of Water, where I've been a scientist there for over 15 years now. I have a deep understanding of how the agency works, how to get things done, how to take a science-based approach to natural resource and environmental quality and protection. So I'm just blown away by the folks in the Division of Fish and Wildlife as I get to know all the conservation professionals on that side of the house, and excited to get things done, keep things moving, learn from folks like Mike and Josh and all the great work that they do every day. So can't wait to hear more about turkeys tonight, but also welcome any questions that you folks have that I can answer. Nobody has any questions for me? Great, perfect. No, I'm just kidding. Dan got to ask me a few questions the other day. Maybe he has more. I see Glenn has a question. Go ahead.
Just a quick one. I'm curious to know whether you have a hunting and fishing background.
Sure. So I was born and raised in upstate New York, and I'm married to an 8th generation farmer. My kids are the 9th generation to live and work here on the farm outside this window here. So I certainly have grown up around hunting and fishing and trapping. We certainly welcome hunting, some fishing, but mostly trapping here on the farm. But it's not something that I'm actively been a participant in. For those of you that know farmers in your community, when you folks are hunting and fishing, I'm planting and plowing and throwing hay bales and all of that. So my downtime generally comes about the time the snow is as deep as my waist. So it's just not something that's been part of my day-to-day life, but certainly something that I'm excited to participate more so in. They had me ice fishing, I think on day 6. So that was fun to get out and learn more about some of those activities. We also have plans for one of the bow hunting weekends that's coming up here in May. We're going to go out and get my bow hunting experience. Going to shoot some crossbows from some tree stands and try out all of this sort of stuff. I also have some kids that are excited to participate in the youth hunt. And so we're going to go ahead and do some of that stuff together. My daughters were a little bit miffed at me this past year that my daughter missed out on the youth hunt because we hadn't gone through the hunter safety course with her just yet. Wanted to do that in person with her, and her and I do that together. So we'll be taking that on this summer so that she can participate next year as well, because that I can tell you firsthand was very popular amongst the junior high kids in our own school district here in Burns. So so anxious to learn more, and certainly open to every experience that comes with this new role. Oh, Glenn, I can see you talking, but you're on mute. Sorry.
I said thank you and welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, if no other questions for Jackie, you can always reach her by calling 518-402-8000 and asking for Maureen Wren, and she will make sure she sets up and meets your needs at any point in time at DEC's press office. But really excited to have Jackie on board. Really look forward to getting out and about more with you and her in the field, and Mike and the team, and really happy to have them here tonight too. But if there are any other questions, happy to pause now. Otherwise, Chris, back to you and back to our other speakers tonight.
All right, well, great. Thank you so much. And yes, welcome and congratulations on your new positions. So yeah, so if we can, if we want to move into turkey talk, I'm happy to turn it over to Mike and Josh. And then I'm sure everybody here is excited to hear about that as well.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And thanks for having me tonight. I really appreciate a chance to talk with you all and share a little bit about turkeys. Josh Stiller is our statewide game bird program leader. He called me at 6:50 tonight saying that he has a stomach bug and he has 2 young kids, so he couldn't join us tonight. But he is, he's recognized nationally as a leader in the waterfowl community, and now he's moving into all game birds. That's where I came up through with DEC, working on small game and game birds, and I'm working with him to transition the turkey program to him as well. But I know he'd like to be here tonight, but unfortunately, the stomach bug got the better of him. But he's a great person to go to in the future if you have questions about all things game bird. So I just want to give a shout out to him. So Chris, I'm going to share some slides if that's okay. Just let me know if, I think you have to turn that on.
Yeah, let me just, who can share? Okay, try that.
Yeah, that works. All right. Did you see that?
Yep.
Look good?
Yeah.
Okay. If anything goes awry, just give me a shout. So like I said, Josh couldn't be here tonight, but I've been with DEC for 21 years now. I'm the head of the game management section. So that's, in charge of planning, policy, research, monitoring for all things hunted and trapped. And that also includes our hunter ed program. So I'll give you a quick overview. I have about 10 or 12 slides. It's going to be a kind of a large scale or high level overview of turkeys and turkey populations and season setting. I'll talk a little bit about what we're expecting for this spring coming up. So this chart shows the turkey population trends as well as the spring turkey harvest over the past 20 years or so. So the green line is the spring turkey harvest, and the orange line is actually from our bow hunter sighting log, which some of you may participate in or know about. That gives us an index of abundance. And I show both of them here just to show that they match pretty well. So we're pretty confident. We use the spring turkey harvest as an indication of abundance, and we use other data points to make sure that that line reflects reality, and it's supported by the bow log. They don't match perfectly, but they match the trend. In the early 2000s, we had a lot of turkeys, you all know, and we saw really high harvest in around 2001 to around 2005 or so. Turkey population settled down. It was probably a natural contraction. There was kind of a perfect storm of conditions through the late 90s and early 2000s after restoration occurred. Large scale changes in habitat, changes in predator communities, things like that, all caused the population to kind of settle back down. And from about 2010 till now, it's been relatively stable. But you see, it hasn't been as high as it once was. And that's corroborated by our turkey productivity estimates. And so also, as many of you know, during the month of August, we asked for sightings from the public as well as DEC staff on number of turkeys they see. And that allows us to get this index of poults per hen. And so that's an indication of reproductive success in a given year or how productive turkeys are. And you see over the same 20-year time frame, you'll see that the difference in the poults per hen from 2001 through 2010 were higher than they are today. And again, we could trace that back to really hen harvest and survival, as well as nest success and poult success. And so again, on a year-to-year basis, you'll often hear us talk about in a cold, wet spring that affects productivity. And that's what we've seen of late. 2 of the last 3 years, we've seen below average productivity when we've had these wet springs. But over the long term, we see lower productivity now. New York's landscape doesn't produce turkeys like they used to. Again, that's partly because of large-scale changes in habitat. Turkeys reach their highest densities in this landscape with a mix of young forest and old fields, as well as mature timber and agriculture. And as New York has lost some of that diversity of habitat, the landscape has become less suitable for turkeys. We also have a more robust and abundant predator community and things like that. So there's a lot going on that is indicating to us that the landscape can't produce as many turkeys as it used to. That said, turkeys are still relatively abundant, and the population of late seems to be relatively stable, even though the past 2 or 3 years, productivity hasn't been great. So I'm going to go through a series of maps for you now, just to orient you. This is from the Bowhunter sighting log. This is that harvest independent index of abundance. These are WMU aggregates across the state, so things like the Catskills and West Appalachian Plateau. And you'll see the little ramp there, the little color ramp. That's an index of abundance. So the darker the color, the more abundant the birds are. And so these are 3-year averages. So turkeys can go up and down from year to year. They can really produce a lot of birds in one year and really not produce a lot of birds in the next. And so, we're using 3-year averages here. And so this is starting in 2004 through 2006. These are 3-year averages. And the dark number in bold there, the 362.3, that's the 3-year statewide estimate of abundance for turkeys, or index of abundance, the sightings per 1,000 hours. And so we're going to go through a bunch of 6 maps here just to show you how turkey populations have changed. Around 2005, turkeys were really abundant. 2005 was kind of a gangbusters production year. And so we kind of feasted off of that for a while. Again, so 2007 through 2009, really seeing the results of those good production years in the mid-2000s. And really turkeys were at their most recent peak. Their highest peak was around 2001 or so, but then they had another peak around 2007 or so. And you can see the number 404 there. Then 2010 to 2012, we really started, that's when we noticed, if you remember from the first graph I showed you, turkey populations really started to come down. And we had some subsequent poor production years, and we didn't really see production like we had in the early 2000s. Again, 2013 to 2015, you'll see if you look at the maps, they just get lighter and lighter, indicating that turkey populations are lower than they used to be. 2016 to 2018, a little bit of a resurgence, but again, not like it was in the early 2000s. And then to the most recent years. And you'll see this is kind of the lightest colored map of all the maps. And this is really the result of poor production in 2019 and again in 2021. 2020 was actually a decent production year, but 2 of the last 3 years, it was poor production. So often when you all call us and you ask, what can we expect for this spring, you'll often hear us talk about this 2-year lag in between productivity and harvest. And so we know that hunters really like to kill toms or 2-plus-year-old birds. And so when we're asked about, well, what can we expect for spring 2022, we often look back to summer of 2020. And so summer of 2020 was a decent production year, was closer to that long-term average. And you'll see the portions of the state, portions of Northern New York and DC Region 4 and Western New York, where production was pretty good that year. And so then we'll start to see the results of that this spring as those birds are mature. And hopefully, you know, there's more birds, older birds available to hunters in the landscape. Last summer, it was a poor production year. And so again, but in terms of what to expect for the spring, we look back to 2020. Now, in terms of fall harvest, in the spring, we have about 85,000 to 90,000 spring turkey hunters. They're killing about 20,000 birds a year. In the fall, we have about 35,000 hunters, and they're killing between 1,500 and 3,000 birds a year in the fall. If you all remember, we experienced a long-term decline in those turkey populations. So in 2015, we actually went through a long process where we looked at hen survival and harvest. We looked at turkey abundance. We looked at hunter satisfaction and what drives hunter satisfaction in the fall. We made adjustments to the fall season that better reflect New York's ability to produce turkeys, and we want to make sure we don't negatively affect turkeys through a fall harvest, because in the fall you can kill birds of either sex. And so in 2015 we modified the season, and now we have a statewide 2-week season. It varies by zone, but I'll go through in a second how we arrived at that. But the season has been the same since 2015, this 2-week season. We also saw a long-term decline in fall turkey hunting participation. Our fall turkey seasons were the same for a long time, for 15, almost 20 years. But despite that, the participation in the fall just kept declining. It could be that hunters were switching to other things like bow hunting or deer hunting, or our hunters were getting out of fall turkey hunting. The numbers in the spring are relatively stable. There's about 90,000 hunters in the spring, and that number is relatively stable, but the number of fall turkey hunters declined for a long time. You can see, though, since about 2015, and even earlier, the number has been pretty stable in the fall. So it doesn't look like the change that we made to that fall season in 2015 affected fall hunting participation. Both harvest and participation in the fall have been relatively stable. So just quickly, how we went through that fall season setting process and how we continue to go through it. So this is, we engage in an adaptive harvest management in the fall. And really the goal is to balance these competing objectives. So one is maximizing turkey population. So you can kill birds of either sex. And so we want to, make sure that we're careful that we don't over harvest hens, because hen survival and harvest really drives population changes. And so one goal is to maximize turkey populations. That includes understanding productivity and abundance, hen harvest and survival. And then balancing that against maximizing hunter satisfaction. So that means their chance to hear and see birds. We know for hunters, we ask them, what's the most important thing to you? And hearing and seeing birds is the most important. Having a chance to go afield, having a chance to kill a bird, and minimizing conflicts with other hunters, feeling like you're not always stumbling across another hunter. And so we can get at the turkey population data through the biological data that we collect. And we ask hunters through social science surveys about what drives their satisfaction. And so we can use the combination of the biological science and social science to set these seasons. And so these graphs are kind of complicated, so I'll walk you through them. So basically what we do is, you see on the lower right-hand side, we look at setting fall seasons in 3 broad zones across New York: Northern New York, Southeastern New York, Long Island, and Western New York. When we base those zones based on similarity of ecological characteristics. And so the landscape features that are important to turkeys and things like that, and that's how we decide on those zones. And then within each of those zones, we try to balance those objectives. You can't maximize both turkey abundance and maximize hunting opportunities. So you have to find the optimal balance between the two. And so in this example, we look at you'll see the 2 weeks, 1 bird, 3 weeks, 1 bird, 4 weeks, 2 birds, 7 weeks, 2 birds. Those are the different fall season alternatives that we're considering. And we try to figure out, based on all of those objectives, which one of those season structures does the best job at balancing turkey abundance and hunter satisfaction. And you'll see across those 3 zones, the longest line is the season that quote unquote wins. It does the best job of balancing turkey abundance and hunter satisfaction. And so we did this in 2015, and it identified that the 2-week, 1 bird season does the best job of balancing those 2 things. And then what happens is, over time, so we ran that for 5 years. And then in 2020, we looked at it again. We put in more up-to-date information, because obviously populations change. We have new data on abundance and productivity. And so then we update that model again. And once again, it identified that the season, the 2-week one bird season was the optimal season for those different portions of New York. And so we didn't make any changes in 2020 because it identified that the season, that we were still in the optimal season framework. So what's next? Well, one question that comes up, and we talked to you all and other folks in your organization before about, is should we have all-day spring hunting in New York? And this is a tough question both for hunters and for DEC wildlife managers. And really, it's about understanding the trade-offs. Kind of like in the fall, the trade-offs between turkey hunting opportunity and turkey abundance, there's trade-offs in the spring as well. So when we ask hunters about do they want to hunt all day, they actually have mixed feelings about it, particularly when at times like right now, when they perceive that turkey populations are down compared to where they were in the past. So for them, they have concerns about granting more hunting opportunity when the turkey population in their eyes is low. So there's a trade-off between increasing hunting and harvest and the potential effects, not just on turkey populations, but really on the age structure of populations. And I'll explain that in a second. So we know in New York that we already have high harvest rates in portions of the state. And so we did a gobbler survival project with Pennsylvania and Ohio a few years ago. And the darker orange areas on the map that I'm showing you are areas that have 50% harvest rates on toms. So during the spring season, roughly half of the toms, based on banding data. So we banded hundreds and hundreds of birds across the landscape. And those bands they were reward bands. And so if you shot a bird and had a reward band, you phoned it in. And so then that's how we have confidence that we understand and can accurately estimate what the harvest rates are. And so in portions of Western New York, those harvest rates are really high, roughly 50%. Overall for the state, they were about 35% for toms and lower for jakes. I want to say low 20% for jakes, but relatively high for toms. And so we know that that's already the case. And so the concern is that if you push the harvest rates even higher, that can affect age structure. And so like I said before, we know that hunters prefer to kill 2+-year-old birds. And so if there's a lower proportion of those birds in the landscape in subsequent years, because increased hunting hours means higher harvest rates, that can negatively affect the age structure of the population and hunter satisfaction. So, a lot of these things, we're trying to evaluate these trade-offs. Hunters have, like I said, we know when we've asked hunters in surveys, when we asked about 10 years ago, roughly 60% or so said they would be okay, that they'd like to hunt into the afternoon. When we asked them about hunting until sunset, it was a lower percentage. It was about 55% or so said they would like to hunt till sunset. So right now we're doing some survey work through our small game hunter survey to look again about hunter preferences for all day hunting, because there's evaluating these trade-offs, and we're going to do so in kind of in this rigorous scientific manner. It takes a lot of resources. So the conducting an experiment and banding birds and all those things, collecting that harvest rate data, it's very resource intensive. And so we have to make sure that we're taking all of that into account when we're figuring out whether we should proceed with a formal study and figure out whether we should have all day spring hunting in New York. So as many of you know, we had a press release recently that we have an open regulatory proposal right now. And the most important part of that proposal is that we're hoping to open a spring turkey season in Suffolk County. So we've had a youth hunt there for over a decade now, same as the youth hunt upstate, a 2-day youth hunt. And we've had a fall season there for almost as long, or actually a little bit longer than that, a relatively short fall season that occurs during late November. And so now we're hoping to have a spring season that's the entire month of May, similar to upstate, except the bag limit would only be 1 bearded bird. Upstate, it's a 2 bearded bird bag limit, but it'd only be 1 bearded bird bag limit down there because we're trying to take a conservative approach. The turkey population, as somebody alluded to prior to the call, is doing really well in Suffolk County. So it wasn't a concern that turkeys weren't abundant enough. It was really concern about making sure we managed compatible uses, especially on state lands. And so hunting has been occurring on state lands in Suffolk County for a long time, but folks are less used to seeing hunting in the spring. But we did a lot of survey work with people who access state lands, And, if we felt like that a spring turkey hunting opportunity, a half hour before sunrise to noon, would be a compatible use, and that other folks using those properties seem to be amenable to that when we ask them through our survey work. So if that gets adopted as proposed, that wouldn't occur until spring of 2023, so a year from now. At the same time, we've gotten a lot of interest the past few years about allowing a number 9 shot. As a lot of you know, there's been changes in technology. TSS shot, a number 9 shot is really effective as a really effective shot size. And previously our regulation only allowed up to number 8, but these advances in technology have said that number 9 shot is really really effective, and it can have a quick, humane kill. And so we're proposing to allow that. Again, if it's adopted as proposed, that would actually be in place for this fall. There's written comments are due by June 5th. You can send them to wildlife@dec.ny.gov or mail them to 625 Broadway. The information's on our website. So interestingly, both of these photos are from Suffolk County. Suffolk County Youth Hunt on the left is from 2013, and the one on the right is from 2021. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And if they're hard questions, Sean and Jackie can answer them. I'll answer the easy questions.
Nobody?
I'll start it off. I actually have 2, but I'll start off with just one. Mike, you and I talked about the 4-year experimental all-day hunting plan that you had formulating, and I just want to know whether that's still being planned.
Yeah, we're still, I mean, the little summary I gave you, Glenn, was essentially a snapshot of the conversations that we're having now among all of our, not just our game bird biologists around the state, as well as our kind of the next level of managers, because it's so, like I said, resource intensive. We're really carefully considering, is this, are we prepared to make this heavy lift? And so I think that there's a good chance that we're going to proceed with it. I don't know how soon we're going to proceed with it, Glenn, because another issue that we have is this concern from hunters that we're hearing now that they have mixed feelings about offering all-day hunting or extending shooting hours when they have concerns about overall turkey abundance. We don't think that extended spring shooting will affect turkey abundance. Like I said, we have concerns more about age structure and the effects on age structure and how that affects hunter satisfaction. But for hunters, it seems, and for the general public as well, it seems like a disconnect that, hey, why are you, if turkey populations are down, why are you increasing hunting opportunities? So we have to be very kind of careful about how we approach it. And so we're giving it a lot of thought, and which is a good thing. I think we're being cautious in stepping into it, but I think we're still hoping to do it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but of course you won't know how it affects it until you try it, and that's what an experimental season would be all about. So, so I hope you do go through with it. But the other question is, in one of your maps or 2 of your maps, it was obvious that south and east of Lake Ontario seemed to be the most productive part of the state for wild turkeys. Why is that?
So with those maps, one thing I would caution against is that so those bow hunting sighting log maps are driven by the number of bow hunters that we have that participate. And some, like, I think one map, it said like the northern Adirondacks had the most turkeys, and that's not necessarily the case. The one caution with those maps is that if you don't have a lot of observers, you have kind of a small sample size, and so you have a few hunters that see a lot of turkeys. And so I would say that's true with northern Adirondacks and Tug Hill on those maps. You have to be cautious about that because those numbers can jump up and down from year to year depending on participation. That said, I would say Jefferson County and St. Lawrence Valley are some of the most productive areas in the state for turkeys. Jefferson County and St. Lawrence Valley are they're kind of turkey factories, and the reason is dairy farming. And so I don't know if you all remember Bill Porter. He was a professor at ESF for many, many years. He just recently passed away. He was kind of a legend in the turkey research world. And so he was one of the folks that really put New York on the map in terms of turkey research and understanding turkey biology and informing turkey management. And so he found that in areas with that mix of agriculture, young forest, old field, and timber, that's when you reach the highest turkey numbers. And he felt like the hot lunch program, which is dairy farmers spreading manure on fields in the winter, really helped turkeys get through those tough winters in northern New York. And so I think it's the short answer is a good mix of habitats in Jefferson and St. Lawrence, Jefferson County, St. Lawrence Valley, and dairy farming all contribute to a robust turkey population.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, if you had an all-day experimental turkey hunt, would it be quote unquote all day, or would it just be extended hours? Mainly the conversations I've had with people about it is they worry about shooting them off the roost, late in the day.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we're having those same conversations about is it 5 o'clock or is it sunset? Primarily the conversations have been sunset. What some states do that have all day hunting is they have a roost shooting provision in their regulation that you can't shoot birds off the limb. So potentially we could do the same thing. If we did that here, we could have a roost shooting provision as part of the regulation. The question comes, about the challenge of enforcing that and that type of thing.
Right.
But that's one way that some states protect roosting birds. But yeah, we've heard that before. But in our conversation so far, it's been just to make it kind of clean and simple. It would be sunset.
Mike, Dave Figueroa here, how do we compare with our surrounding states? Do they offer full day turkey hunting? Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Vermont.
Yeah. So New York participates in the Northeast Upland Game Bird Tech Committee. It's 13 states from Virginia to Maine. So roughly half the states have some type of, I think about 6 out of those 13 states have some type of all-day hunting. And so Pennsylvania, I'm not going to remember them off the top of my head, but Pennsylvania has like all-day hunting for the second half of the season. I think Vermont might have it for the second half of the season. And so I have to look up the data, but only very few states in the Northeast have all day for the whole season. So Maine is one of them. They have all day hunting for the entire season, and maybe Virginia.
Okay.
But again, I can look those up and get them back to you. But the other half of the states in the Northeast just have half day like New York does. One thing that we have to be cautious about in New York is that, relative to other states, we have a lot of turkey hunters. And so we can put more pressure on birds than a state like Maine, where they harvest, 4,000 or 5,000 birds in the spring compared to New York where we harvest 20. And so, that it's not always apples to apples comparison. So I think it's roughly half of the states have some form of all day.
One follow-up question. How confident are you on your harvest numbers? I know when you talk about the deer hunting season, what are you in the high 40s or something like that, as far as hunters who are reporting their kills? And then you guys also hit up the meat processors, but people don't take their turkeys to meat processors. They process them at home. Any idea of how many hunters are reporting their kills?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for folks that don't know, we actually estimate our turkey harvest. Some states just rely on reported take. We know in New York that roughly half of hunters in the spring report their harvest. And how we know that is, so we have mandatory quote unquote harvest reporting through our decal system. But we conduct a survey immediately after the close of the season. So we do a random poll of 12,000 turkey permit holders, which is a large sample size, and we send them a survey postcard. And we ask them, did you go afield? Where did you hunt? How many days did you hunt? Did you kill a bird? And so from that survey, we can compare that estimate of take to our reported harvest. And we know that we have a roughly 50% reporting rate. Other states like Pennsylvania engage in a similar method. We've been doing it for many years, and so we're pretty confident in those numbers. You're right. People don't take their birds to a butcher or a processor, and so that the turkey survey after the close of the season is how we estimate harvest, participation, and effort.
Thank you.
Just a
Any questions,
comment, if
Mike?
I could. The spring turkey season, the quality of the hunt, at least from my viewpoint, I've never hunted a state that had all-day hunting. And I hear quite a bit from Glenn that he has hunted a number of states, and I suspect Steve Pyatt, if he's on, has probably hunted a number of states that have all-day hunting. But the quality of the hunt, I feel certain things could be lost by having late afternoon hunting. I mean, towards the roost, there are places that I hunt that birds are roosting in the same general location almost every day. And all you'd have to do is sit by a roost site and ambush a bird as they're coming into the roost. I think, spring hunting for an afternoon, perhaps the quality of the hunt could be the same, but if it stopped at like 6 o'clock and not beyond that, you'd prevent some of the ambushes that are occurring as birds come to the roost site, and it would prevent the roost shooting. So you'd have a limit at the end of the day when you'd have to stop hunting. And I think that would be a better move as far as the quality of the hunt and the satisfaction of those that are hunting.
All right, good. That's good. That's good feedback. Thank you.
Hey, Mike. I had a couple questions. One on the number 9 shot. I don't see it stipulated that it has to be the advanced technology. And I think we all know that even number 8s and number 9s and just plain old lead or copper plated lead is pretty inadequate for an adult sized gobbler. And I know in some of the people that I talked to in that blog, I posted your press release on my blog, and a lot of the comments are, yeah, that's fine as long as they make it, something heavier lead, heavy shot, TSS, but not just a typical lead shot. That was one comment, and I basically responded to people, send your comments in. Speak your piece, more or less. And the other thing is, in the satisfaction of hunters in the fall, it doesn't seem that there's a lot of consideration for people that run turkey dogs, because the way it got set up is not very friendly to those that are running dogs for turkeys in the fall. Now you have deer season starts off in the southern tier, same time as some of the different zones, and it's a 2-week season. And if you have a heavy mass crop, it takes you 2-3 weeks before you start finding out, because the birds where the birds are, because they sit on food. They don't travel. They don't leave scent for dogs. That's the beauty of it is having the dogs find the scent trails, and of course then you bust the birds and do your thing. But it seems like it lends itself more toward bow hunters who want to shoot something out of a stand. I know there are some states that don't allow you to shoot from an elevated platform for fall turkey. And I think that if you were really trying to pull back the numbers and harvest, I think I remember it being reported many years ago at one of our state chapter NWTF meetings that it was something like 60 to 70% of the fall harvest is from an elevated stand. You might have more accurate, you might have more recent numbers, or I don't remember the number exactly. That's kind of what I remember, but that was, quite a few years ago. So that was my input there. And the last comment was on all day hunting. I hunt a bunch of states that do have all day hunting. I will say that it sounds really good on paper as far as, the hunting all day. By about the 3rd or 4th day of hunting all day, you're about ready to do very long adult naps in the afternoon, or just say to hell with it anyway. It runs you pretty ragged if you hunt like some of us do, where you get on, you cover a lot of ground, and you do that from 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning until 6, 7 at night. But the input I had for that was make it an hour before sunset, and or stipulate that roost shooting is illegal. I know some of the states, they were very explicit about, they have very exact language about that roost shooting was an infraction. So I just wanted to make that comment. That's all I had.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. That's all good information. For the number 9 shot, I will say, if you start to specify what it can be made of and that type of thing, the technology kind of changes so quickly that we were concerned that as soon as we were specific about what the composition had to be, that it was going to change and somebody was going to come out with something else, and then we'd have to adapt again. That's and so then we looked at.
You could stipulate a density and not stipulate the technology at all.
Yeah, and then you get into issues with enforcement in the field and that type of thing, and how an ECO can reasonably determine what's allowed and what's not. We looked at what other states did, and other states were more broad and just saying that you could use number 9. And as with any hunting, not just turkey hunting, whether you're hunting with a longbow or crossbow and things like that, we always stress with the hunter that you have to know your firearm, know your capabilities, know the capabilities of the implement you're using. And so it's always going to take some good judgment. If you're just because you're shooting number 4s with a full choke out of a 10 or 12 gauge, doesn't necessarily mean that you can take 60-yard shots and roll birds and not recover them either. So but there's always going to be a little bit on the hunter too, to make sure they're making good decisions and knowing what their capabilities and the capabilities of their implement.
With this proposed change, I know the space is always a premium on these booklets and things. Whether or not they might put some language that for smaller shot that heavier than lead, or some density, or recommend something other than lead. I think that would be helpful, especially for novices who they see 7 on or 9 on the box and don't necessarily know what to look for.
Yeah, no, understood.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say regarding the turkey dog issue, so that was interesting. So when we did all that work, we surveyed specifically turkey hunters, asking them in the fall about their activities and things like that. And they in terms of like conflicts with other hunters and wanting to be out there when worrying about bow hunters being out there or that type of thing, because you had mentioned that, that was the lowest of their concerns. So really seeing birds and hearing birds and just having the chance to go afield, that was the most important thing to that group. And so that's what was really driving that decision more than anything. But I understand what you're saying about in terms of turkey dog folks, that to address your question. So you would, if you engage in that activity, your suggestion would be that the season should be longer so folks have more time to get their dogs on birds. Is that what you're saying?
I had written a piece some time ago that if you made the fall season from not from an elevated stand, and even made it for bearded birds or gobblers only, the folks that are busting up flocks in the fall get the enjoyment of calling the birds in. And if you have no long beards or bearded birds in the callback, you move on to the next flock. So you don't get the shot, but you don't really lose the satisfaction of the hunt. I mean, the calling and getting them in is 99% of the hunt. It's that kind of a activity. With dogs, yeah, the dogs would certainly like to run over and grab the bird. They do enjoy that, but the big part of it is the chase. So, but yeah, it's not so much that, I don't really mind myself personally that who's in the woods. I have ran into bow hunters that get really upset, but I've ran into people that are pretty knowledgeable deer hunters and realize that when you go through a piece of woods, the deer follow you, and that the deer just as soon know where you are or where you were and where you're going. And I've literally killed deer that way right after people come through. And I've had deer hunters come up to me and say, I'll be very nervous and looking half hour after you leave. So, it depends on the experience and knowledge base of the bow hunter, of course. But there's a fair amount of back and forth about having their hunts ruined because somebody comes through with their dog. It's the kind of same thing that grouse hunters and pheasant hunters have to deal with. It's similar to that.
Could I comment on the shot sizes. This is historically, for the first 5 years that we had spring turkey hunting in New York, there were no shot sizes regulated. The only thing you couldn't use is a single ball or slug. There were no shot sizes whatsoever. That was from 1968 through 1972. You could hunt them with buckshot. You could hunt turkeys with BBs, a lot of waterfowl loads that were used for goose hunting. And I sat in my office one day in Albany and I said, we've got to do something about shot sizes. So I experimented a little bit with 3/4 inch plywood at about 40 yards and a little bit less with 8s and 9s, and 9s didn't do the job. 8s very clearly just barely made it through the plywood, and some of those didn't. And most of those loads, of course, were target loads, skeet loads or trap loads for those two shot sizes. So we went back and forth in the division. Our division director and assistant director knew very little about turkey hunting, but we had some people on staff that did. And I got together with Jim Davis, who was our department counsel for the Division of Fish and Wildlife. And I wrote the legislation that set up the shot sizes no larger than 2s, no smaller than 8s. And that went through. And in 1973, I think was the first year that we had shot sizes legally set up in order to, have sizes that were appropriate for the loads that they had at the time, which were mostly lead loads or copper coated lead. And I know there's been some major changes, and I've used some of those changes over the years with different types of heavy shot and so forth on turkeys. But 2s up to 8s, I think have done the job for 50 years now, just a little over 50 years. Whether number 9s with the downrange energy that they can produce now with some of the shot components and so forth is fine as far as I'm concerned. But old number 5s, 3-inch mag Longbeards, Winchesters are still a killer as far as I'm concerned. And not many turkeys escape when they've been hit in the head or neck with those shot sizes. But granted, I have no opposition to turkey loads that go to number 9s if they've got the energy and so forth that's going to do the job. But I think the loads that we've had in using anything from actually 7.5s down to number 2s have worked excellent over the years.
Yeah, thanks. That's good information. And yeah, the vast majority of hunters are going to be right with you, sticking with their whatever it is, 4, 5, 6s that they're comfortable with and have used for forever. And so this is the number of people that are going to use TSS shot is probably really a small number. But we want to be able to accommodate those advances that have come along in the past couple of years. But that's good.
It'll be good for the kids. It'll be good for some of the young hunters. That 410 is a nice shot. We got a question that Bob Henke had. He's having audio trouble.
Okay.
So he had the following question for you, Mike. It says, I was wondering if the extended hours in the spring would have any impact on unintentional take of hens coming off the nest to feed in the afternoon.
That's a great question. And that is always a concern of ours. And we were actually looking to see how we could answer that question, right? And so to bring other folks who may not be aware of that up to speed, there was concerns about all day hunting disrupting hens, either, when hens are sitting on nests, they'll get off the nest in the afternoon to feed earlier in incubation. So, or hunters might be walking through the woods and flush them off the nest, causing them to abandon, or hens might be wandering around and be accidentally killed. And so there was concerns about hen harvest and survival, unintentional hen harvest and survival in extended spring shooting hours. It's really hard to answer that question scientifically. And so I talked to lots of researchers from Louisiana State, Penn State, ESF, all over the place that have looked at these questions. And, basically you'd have to put out so many radios on hens, GPS radios, advances in technology, that you'd go broke. It's such a hard question to answer because your sample sizes would be so small, you really couldn't make any conclusive statements about whether there's a relationship between extended spring shooting and hen survival. The one thing that we would do as part of an experimental season, though, is we would give hunters diaries. And so we would ask them about encounter rates. Did you see hens? Did you flush hens off a nest? That type of thing, and try to get some information that way. But actually, scientifically, studying hens through radio tags and a lot of traditional ways that's done, it's just too labor and cost prohibitive to be able to answer that question definitively. But it is a concern. And was there another question?
I had a couple of questions, Mike, that have more to do with some of the population trends that you were talking about earlier in your presentation. And the one is predation. What is killing turkeys out there? I mean, just from an observational standpoint, when I was a kid, everybody hunted raccoons or trapped raccoons. And I know raccoons are rough on any ground nesting bird. Whippoorwills, we used to have whippoorwills around here when I was a kid, and we haven't, if we hear a whippoorwill every 5 years, we're lucky. We seem to find whippoorwills in the same place, year after year after year. In grouse numbers, of course, we don't see them like we see them. And I know the habitat's changed. And is it more predator favorable? Overall, my question is how much of an impact predators are having on populations, and what predators is it? Everybody wants to blame coyotes and bobcats, but I think if there's predation, I think it's just as much on things that are eating eggs, like foxes and raccoons and even snakes, maybe. Just curious if there's been any research along those lines at all with these population trends, because I know other states are looking at that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so it's not predators per se. It's really a lack of nesting and brood rearing habitat that makes hens and poults more vulnerable to predation. So that said, though, the big predators are the ones that you cited. So it's mostly nest predators. So things like raccoons, skunks, possums, things that are really good at finding nests. And so more so than coyotes, and a lot of times we'll hear fisher and bobcats, and name the predator, and that they're the ones eating all the turkeys. It's actually nest predators, the smaller nest predators like raccoons, skunks, and possums, that can have a bigger impact on turkey abundance because they can really find and eat all those eggs. So I think that's probably the biggest issue in terms of just in general. In the spring and summer, after poults, poults, once they're 10, 12 days old, they can fly, they're pretty mobile, but for those first 10 days, they're just running around on the ground. So they're pretty vulnerable to all kinds of predators, whether it's avian predators, different raptors. Everybody wants to eat a turkey poult. So it's hard out there during the summer. But it's really that low nest success and those nest predators that probably proportionally have the biggest impact overall on whether it's a good turkey or not.
The other part of that discussion was the importance of the summer surveys. We talked when we were in Saratoga last fall about getting some of the press releases out sooner. I think if you could get that one out to us sooner, we could probably do a lot more with it for you. I guess my question there is, are you getting the participation that you want from people for those surveys?
Yeah, thanks. I know, I definitely appreciate that. So we get about 1,000 records every August. And so for those folks who aren't aware, the summer sighting survey is the month of August. And the reason it's the month of August is because for the general public, it's the easiest time to, it's late enough in the season that we're confident that the birds we see in August are going to make it into the fall. Earlier in the year, a lot of the birds that you may see, they may not make it to the fall. So August is kind of that sweet spot where you can still tell big birds from little birds. And so it's easy to differentiate hens with poults and that type of thing. And so that's why we do it during the month of August. And so right now we're getting about 1,000 records a year. Sometimes, it's 800, 900, sometimes it's 1,200. More is always better, of course. But that 1,000 records a year is actually a pretty good sample size. When I look at other states and they do similar surveys, summer surveys, we probably get more records than they do. Granted, New York is a bigger state, but we're pretty happy with participation. But like you said, anything you guys can do to raise awareness and have folks contribute, we always welcome that. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, if you can get us that release this year, like mid-July, somewhere around there, I know it usually comes out real close to August, but again, like we talked about in October, how far, not just Outdoor News, but all of us work ahead. We're a lot of us that write for weekly papers, our deadline is a week or so, or within a week's time of when we're printing it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, a question for you or Maureen that I would have is, is there a danger of sending it too far in advance where you might run it and people forget about it, or how does that work?
Well, what we were getting at when we were talking in October was the fact that a lot of stuff comes out too late for us. I mean, that's definitely the case with my publication, but even when I was just working for a weekly newspaper in Glens Falls, a lot of times by the time the press release come out, I was already hitting on that date. So let's say that turkey season is May 1st. It's a Sunday. We would be running our things, something in a paper. A lot of these guys that are writing columns have them in the Sunday before. So rather it being in the Sunday, May 1st, they would probably want to have it in this coming Sunday's paper, the 24th. So you would think in terms of that. For Outdoor News, we're even farther ahead. We're even farther ahead than that. So just something in advance, and that's something we've talked about a lot in the past, but with this, to get it out in a timely manner so that readers are reading it by the last week in July, early August to participate, I'd say at least 2 weeks ahead of that. And that's a general rule, really.
Okay,
I think a lot of people here would agree with that are in our group.
We also got a question on the chat from Bill. Bill says here, quite a few diehard turkey hunters he talks to would like to see hens protected in the fall. Is there any consideration for this?
So we actually, when we were going through our fall season setting process, one of the things we considered was making it a gobbler only season, so adult males. You really restrict hunting opportunity when you do that. The number of adult males taken in the fall makes up, a quarter of the harvest or something like that. So we want to, again, strike that balance. There's always trade-offs, right? But we want to strike that balance between granting hunting opportunity, but also protecting the population. And so that's why we stuck to the either sex. One thing we do know is that hunters are not, it's always challenging for hunters to differentiate males and females in the fall, young males and hens. And so we've done a lot of survey work where we ask hunters, what was the bird you killed? And then when we look at what they actually killed, a lot of times they'll call a Jake an adult hen and vice versa. And so I think it'd be challenging for hunters to be able to comply with that. So that's why we haven't gone that route.
Mike, a question on the upcoming, on the proposed Long Island season. First of all, it'll be gun and bow both?
Yep, any illegal implement except you can't use crossbows there, right?
And is it anticipated that all the fall New York State lands that are on which turkey hunt is allowed will participate in the spring? Or is it possible that may be cut back because of user conflicts?
So that's a good question. This is where I wish Josh was here. Josh used to actually work on Long Island, so he's much more familiar with management of the lands down there. I think the DEC managed lands that allow hunting will be open for turkey hunting. I'm not sure how, like all the states, the state parks properties and the county properties, all those other properties that allow hunting in the fall. I don't know that we know yet if and how they'll participate in a spring hunt in Suffolk County. So Michelle Gibbons and Chip Hamilton. Michelle Gibbons is the Region 1 wildlife manager. Chip Hamilton is their Region 1 biologist. They're working on that right now to figure out, how that would work. But I think the DEC managed lands will be open.
That's good to know. I'm curious because I know the county parklands in particular see a big uptick in usage in the spring, especially May.
Yeah, that's definitely something I know they're going to work very carefully on to make sure that, they maintain those partnerships and they make sure that those uses are compatible. So Michelle and Chip are the folks to talk to about that.
Hey, Tom, are we even allowed to harvest a turkey in a county park? I don't believe we are in the fall. I think that's just deer only, to be honest with you.
I'm not certain. I haven't had to actually hunt a county park.
Yeah, I do
Ohio.
some deer hunting in the county. I don't think you're allowed to take a turkey unless that's changed, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
I could double check on that.
Okay, were there any other questions?
Just another comment, when I talked about shot sizes earlier, another major consideration, of course, with larger shot sizes, such as BBs and such as some of the heavy goose loads and things like that, was a consideration for safety. Most hunters that have been shot by other turkey hunters have survived at least, and so the heavier shot sizes were ruled out, like BBs and some of the heavy goose loads, in initiating the first limitations on shot sizes. A safety factor was certainly a consideration at that time, and still is, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks. I forgot to mention it before. I was talking about hunting seasons in general, but so as you well know, New York hunters are very safe and they've been getting safer over time, and that's true for turkey hunting as well. The past 3 years, we've had one incident each spring, which is below the long-term average was, I think, 5 or 6 incidents. And we've had several years where it's been 0 or 1. Of course, 1 is one too many, but still they've had an exceptional kind of track record here in the spring. And often in the fall, we have no hunting related shooting incidents associated with turkey hunting. So turkey hunting in New York is very safe activity.
Mike, I just got a quick question. This just come in off the top of my head. I thought about it earlier when you were talking, and it's something we've talked about before. They ever considered mandatory reporting of, both turkeys, deer, and bear? Anything that, is as a tag?
We do have mandatory reporting.
Well, you know what I mean? Something, I know by law, you're supposed to report, but I guess if you wouldn't be able to buy another license the next year if you didn't report whether you got, what happened with your tags the year before, something along those lines.
Yeah, we've talked about that. And some states have that where, you show up in whatever it is, September, to buy your license. And at the point of sale, you have to answer some questions like, did you kill a deer? Did you kill a turkey? That type of thing. Those data tend not to be super reliable. One, because of, there's a bunch of different biases associated with them. One's called recall bias. One is just like, I need to get through this in order to, get my license. And so you don't always get the highest quality data.
Right.
So we've talked about those different things to different requirements, but we haven't implemented them because of the limitations associated with them. With our deer harvest and with our turkey harvest, the system that we have with deer check in the fall and with the turkey hunter survey after the fall and spring seasons have been tools that really work for us and that we have a lot of confidence in. So that's why we're always looking to improve them and the way we collect data and the efficiency with which we collect data and that type of thing. But so far, I think in terms of like all the different tools in the toolbox, what we're using right now is the best.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to do this tonight. I think speak on the behalf of NYSO, I really appreciate this. I think this is really important to have this kind of information get out there. Thank you, Maureen, for helping organize this. Thank you, Jackie, for joining us and introducing yourself. And thank you, Bill Holster, for kind of getting this started. He got this going. So if any of our other members have any other ideas or things they want to do, please let me know and we could try to accommodate our membership. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Have a
for
great
having
night.
us.
Thank you.
Talk to you guys soon.